The rain came down like a relentless sheet that night, transforming the town's quiet streets into a twisting, murky labyrinth. Landon walked briskly, his head bowed to shield against the cutting wind, when a sound pierced through the storm. A faint cry, frail and desperate, nearly swallowed by the rain. Instinctively, he traced it to an isolated tree where he found a young girl huddling to protect two small bundles from the downpour. "Please, don't come any closer," she shouted, her voice trembling with fear. Landon froze, sensing the anguish woven into her words. "I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to help," he called out, his voice gentle yet steady, hoping to break through the wall of fear enveloping her. The girl, Avery, looked up, her tear-filled eyes wide and pleading. They're my brothers. They have no one," she whispered, clutching the two small forms as though letting go might mean losing them forever. Landon's heart ached at the sight of Ethan and Mason's pale faces, so fragile and vulnerable. "They're so delicate," he thought, compassion welling up within him. "You don't have to face this alone," he said, extending a hand to Avery, offering but not forcing his help. With a mix of fear and a glimmer of hope, Avery hesitated, then nodded. "Please, help us," she murmured. Landon carefully lifted one of the twins, feeling the chill of the small body against his chest. "Come on. My house isn't far. You all need to warm up," he reassured her, draping his coat around the baby. Avery tried to stand, but exhaustion weighed her down. "Here, lean on me," he urged, wrapping her arm over his shoulder for support. The ground seemed to shift beneath them with every step, yet Landon moved with unwavering resolve, his only focus on bringing them to safety. "They're so cold, and I'm so scared," Avery whispered as they walked, her voice barely audible. "I know," Landon replied gently, "but you're not alone now. We'll get through this together." The walk to his home was brief, yet for Avery, each second felt endless. When they reached his door, Landon pushed it open, revealing a modest but welcoming space. "Quick, get inside," he urged, guiding her across the threshold. The warmth of the fireplace wrapped around them, a soothing contrast to the night's bitter chill. Avery nearly collapsed in relief as the warmth settled over her. "Place them by the fire," Landon said softly, laying out blankets on the floor for the children. "They'll be all right," he repeated, his voice carrying a quiet reassurance, as if by saying it, he could somehow make it true. Avery, now seated beside the twins, looked up at him, her face a mixture of gratitude and weariness. "I don't know how to thank you," she began, but Landon lifted a hand, cutting her off gently. "There's no need for thanks. The most important thing is that you're safe now," he replied with a soft smile that brought a sense of calm Avery hadn't felt in ages. He returned moments later with a mug of hot tea. "Here, this'll help settle your nerves," he said, passing her the steaming cup. She accepted it with shaking hands, feeling warmth seep into her as the steam brushed her face. The twins, finally warm and nourished, drifted into peaceful sleep, their tiny bodies relaxed for the first time in hours. Landon watched them, his gaze tender as though they were already a part of his own family. "You're a good man, Landon," Avery murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "I was so terrified. I didn't think anyone would care." Kneeling beside her, Landon rested a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Believe me, kindness still exists, even in places you'd least expect," he promised, his words laced with sincerity. "And for as long as I'm able, I'll be here to help." Avery finally let herself breathe, a long, quivering sigh of relief, escaping as a sense of hope began to mend the broken pieces of her spirit. "Thank you for everything," she whispered before her eyes closed, her weariness finally giving way to sleep. But for Landon, the night was far from over. As Avery and the twins slept soundly, he remained by the fire, watching the flickering flames and wondering what tomorrow might bring. As dawn broke, soft rays of light filtered through the window of Landon's modest home, casting a warm glow over the room where the fire's embers still crackled faintly. In a nearby chair, Avery sat silently, her gaze fixed on her younger brothers as they slept soundly, untroubled in this fleeting moment. Landon, noticing the worry etched on her young face, approached slowly and took a seat beside her. "Avery, you're safe here now," he began gently. "But I need to understand what happened. Why were you alone with your brothers out there? And where is your mum?" Avery looked down, biting her lip as she fought back tears. For one so young, she carried a weight of memories no child should bear. "My mum, her name is Brooke," she started, her voice wavering but steady with determination. "She was working for a bad man named Colton. He's rich and powerful, and everyone's afraid of him. He and my mum, they were together," she added, her words carrying an unsettling blend of innocence and an early wisdom beyond her years. Landon listened, urging her gently to continue. "What happened then?" he asked, already bracing himself for her response. Avery drew a shaky breath, steeling herself as painful memories surfaced. "Mum got pregnant with Ethan and Mason," she whispered, her voice cracking. "When she told Colton, he got really angry. He told her she couldn't have us, that he didn't want kids, that he was too important to worry about children." The words spilled out in a shaky murmur. "But Mum, she loved us. She couldn't accept that. She told him he had to take responsibility, to acknowledge the twins as his own, even if she knew it would be hard." Her voice grew darker as she went on, eyes fixed on the floor. "Mum was brave. She told him he had to be our father, to take care of us. But he only got angrier, said if she didn't leave him alone, bad things would happen to all of us, that he could do anything he wanted." Landon felt the intensity of her fear as he gently held her hand, offering what little comfort he could. "That must have been so hard for her," he said softly, his heart heavy with empathy. Avery nodded, blinking away tears that now began to fall. Mom was terrified. She knew he could hurt us. So one night, she woke me up and told me to take my brothers, that we needed to leave. She said she'd find us later, but she never came. Her voice broke as she confessed, a whisper turning into sobs. "I waited, Landon. I waited. But she didn't come back." Landon's chest tightened with a mix of sorrow and admiration. He could imagine Brooke's anguish, making such an agonizing choice, sending her children away to keep them from Colton's ruthless grip. "So you ran away with your brothers to protect them." Landon looked at her, deeply moved. "That was incredibly brave, Avery," he murmured, feeling a profound respect for this child who, in the face of unimaginable danger, had shown more courage than many adults. Avery wiped her cheeks, trying to stifle her emotions. "I just want her back. I want Mom to be okay," she whispered, her voice laden with a sadness that felt too heavy for her small shoulders. Landon nodded, resolute. "We'll find her, Avery. I promise, and Colton, he'll answer for everything." As Avery finally drifted to sleep, the weight of her revelations settled over Landon, unveiling the full extent of Colton's cruelty and the dangers they now faced. Sitting quietly by the twins, his mind raced with the plans he would need to set in motion. He was stepping into a perilous fight, one that demanded both courage and cleverness. But for these 3 children and for Brooke, He would face whatever storm lay ahead. Colton's shadow loomed large, but Landon knew he would stand against it. There was only one person Landon could turn to, a man with enough experience to help him devise a plan. Alex, an old friend and former police officer, had a reputation for his unwavering integrity and his unbreakable resolve to seek justice, even after leaving the force. "I need your help, Alex," Landon thought as he set out, fully aware of the risks, but certain he had no other choice. When he arrived at Alex's unassuming home, he was met with a look of surprise. "Landon, what brings you here at this hour?" Alex asked, his gaze sharp, quickly picking up on the worry etched on Landon's face. Landon paused, knowing he couldn't afford to lose time. "Alex, I'm in trouble, and I need your help. I've found 3 children, and they're in danger because of Colton." Alex's eyes darkened at the mention of Colton, his old adversary. "Come inside. Let's talk," he said, his voice both firm and tinged with concern. Seated around Alex's worn kitchen table, Landon laid out everything: Avery's shaking hands, Colton's threats, Brooke's disappearance, and the looming danger facing the twins. Alex listened in silence, his face growing harder with each detail. "Colton's always been ruthless, but this—" he muttered, his gaze fixed, mind racing. "You did the right thing coming here, but we've got to be careful. Colton has eyes everywhere." Landon felt the weight of Alex's words settle over them, but his voice held steady. "I know it's a risk, but I can't just stand by. These kids need protection. And Brooke, she could be in danger too. I can't let Colton keep hurting innocent people." His voice was pleading, but resolute, his gaze never leaving Alex's. Alex took a deep breath, understanding the gravity of the situation and feeling the weight of the responsibility he was about to shoulder. "You're right, Landon. I'll help you, but we need to be strategic. Colton won't go down without a fight," Alex said, already formulating a plan in his mind. They spent hours analyzing every detail, going over their options. "First, we need solid evidence. Without that, we have no case against Colton," Alex said, standing and pacing the room. "I still know some people on the force we can trust, but we'll need to be discreet. One wrong move and Colton will know everything." Landon nodded, realizing the care needed to ensure Avery, Ethan, and Mason's safety. "Let's start with finding Brooke," he suggested, his voice filled with hope. "If we find her, she can testify against Colton and help protect the children." Determination filled him as he thought about the possibility. Alex agreed. "We need to find her, if Colton hasn't already hidden her, and we need to start gathering evidence. Anything that can tie him to his threats and actions." His mind already traced the lines of investigation. As they prepared to part ways, Alex placed a firm hand on Landon's shoulder. "Landon, I know you're doing this for those kids, but this fight isn't safe. Colton will do anything to protect himself. You need to be prepared for whatever comes." Landon nodded, feeling the gravity of Alex's words. "I know, Alex, but these kids deserve a life free from fear, and I won't let Colton ruin their lives." His voice was unwavering, filled with a strength he hadn't felt in a long time. With a plan set and a renewed sense of hope, Landon returned home, where Avery and the twins were waiting. The road ahead would be difficult, but with Alex at his side, Landon felt they finally had a chance to win this fight. With their initial plan laid out, Landon and Alex embarked on a mission that demanded every ounce of their focus and courage. Their goal was clear: gather the damning evidence needed to bring Colton down and ensure the safety of Avery, Ethan, and Mason. The early days were fraught with tension. each move carefully calculated, every conversation hushed to whispers, with the unsettling thought that Colton could be watching, listening, always one step ahead. Alex's background as a former police officer proved invaluable. He knew precisely where to dig and how to stay off Colton's radar. "Landon, we have to be precise," Alex often reminded him. "Colton's got ears everywhere. One slip and it's over." Quietly, Alex reached out to a select few trusted former colleagues, careful not to disclose too much. "I can't share the full picture," he'd say, "but I need information on Brooks' whereabouts and any connections that might link Colton to his crimes." While Alex worked his contacts, Landon took on the task of shielding the children from the storm brewing around them. He kept up appearances, going through the motions of everyday life while the constant worry gnawed at him, a silent storm within. Alex would often remind him, "They can't know what we're doing. Colton's sharp, but we've got to be sharper." The breakthrough came when one of Alex's reluctant contacts finally came through, providing crucial details on Colton's covert dealings. "Look here," Alex showed Landon, pointing to hidden records of suspicious transactions, enormous sums masked within layers of legitimate business. "It'll be hard to prove outright, but we're onto something." Landon, though not versed in finance, recognized the significance. "This is just the beginning, Alex. We have to go deeper," he urged, with a steely determination that grew with each new lead. Their most intense moment arrived when they tracked down one of Colton's secret properties, a secluded house where Colton carried out his darkest operations. "We've got a lead on something big, but it's dangerous. We'll need to move fast and leave no trace," Alex cautioned, his voice low and resolute. Without hesitation, Landon agreed. "I can't sit this out, not if it means keeping Brooke and the kids safe," he said, resolve evident in his tone. The two entered the property with nerves of steel, moving in complete silence, every sound in the air thick with tension. Inside, they discovered a hidden room housing critical documents. "Here it is," Alex whispered, opening a concealed safe. "These files, this is Colton's web, bribes, threats, everything we need." Landon held the incriminating evidence, feeling the weight of what it represented. "This is it. This could finally end him," he whispered, a potent mix of hope and dread swirling inside him. Yet their success only raised the stakes. Sensing a threat, Colton grew suspicious and ordered his men to monitor his perceived enemies closely. The atmosphere around Landon and Alex tightened, every glance feeling like a warning. "We have to be more vigilant than ever," Alex warned, watching Colton's every move. "If he's on edge, it means we're close, but it also means the danger's rising." Landon knew there was no turning back. Despite the mounting risks, they were within reach of exposing Colton's empire of deceit. "We're so close, we can't stop now," he vowed, his voice steady, masking the fear he could feel building inside him. With the evidence secure, Landon and Alex readied themselves for the final stage, bringing Colton's corrupt empire crashing down. It was a race against the clock, each passing second heavy with tension. The following days unfolded in a frenzy of urgency as Landon and Alex prepared to launch the final strike against Colton. Their evidence was carefully catalogued, their plan expertly designed to expose Colton's deeds. They were tantalizingly close to securing justice. Yet, as the day loomed closer, Landon's heart wrestled with a tangle of hope and dread. His thoughts revolved around ensuring the safety of Avery, Ethan, and Mason, and the slim, fading possibility of finding Brooke alive. Alex had been a steadfast friend and ally through it all, someone Landon had come to trust implicitly. On the night of their final move, Alex suggested they meet somewhere isolated, away from any prying eyes or Colton's potential informants. "We need to be cautious, Landon. Let's meet somewhere secure. Bring everything, and together we'll take it straight to the press and the authorities," Alex said with a grave tone, one Landon didn't question. After securing Avery and the children's safety, he prepared to leave. "Don't take too long, Landon. I'm frightened," Avery whispered, clutching his hand tightly. Landon knelt to meet her eyes, his gaze firm and reassuring. "I'll be back soon, and when I am, this nightmare will be over. You'll be safe," he promised, trying to mask his own unease. She nodded, attempting to be brave, though fear lingered in her gaze. The designated meeting spot was an abandoned warehouse on the city's edge, its broken windows and mossy walls exuding a dismal sense of abandonment. Shadows twisted eerily around rusty machines as dim, flickering lights cast ghostly shapes on the walls. Landon stepped inside, shivering at the damp cold that pressed down on him, his footsteps echoing hollowly. Alex stood there, waiting, his face set in a hardened, almost distant focus. "You brought everything?" Alex asked curtly. "Yes, it's all here," Landon responded, handing him the thick folder packed with incriminating evidence. Alex sifted through it, the silence heavy between them. "It's finally going to end," Landon said, tension and relief battling within him. Alex nodded, yet his voice was cold, lacking any trace of their usual camaraderie. Landon felt a shiver creep up his spine, a primal instinct warning him. "Alex, what's going on?" he asked, his confidence faltering. But before he could react, a crushing blow struck the back of his head, making him stagger and collapse to his knees. His vision swam, and a searing pain pulsed through his skull as he struggled to stay conscious. Strangers emerged from the shadows, menacing and cold, surrounding him swiftly. "Alex, what is this?" Landon shouted, his voice laced with confusion and betrayal. Alex stepped forward, his expression icy and devoid of any guilt. "I'm sorry, Landon, but business is business," he said, each word sharp and chilling. Landon stared at him in shock, struggling to comprehend the betrayal unfolding before him. You were working for him all along," Landon stammered, his voice breaking as he tried to believe it was all a nightmare. "Colton paid me handsomely to keep you from getting too close. Every move you made he knew from the beginning," Alex replied, his tone indifferent, void of remorse. Landon's heart sank under the weight of those words, each syllable stabbing deep. "I trusted you, Alex. Why?" he whispered, barely able to find the strength to speak. Alex shrugged, his face hardened with apathy. "Because power and money will always matter more," he replied coldly, as Colton's men seized Landon, dragging him to the far side of the warehouse. "Take him to the usual spot. The boss wants a word before we wrap this up," Alex ordered, his voice devoid of the humanity Landon had once believed was there. Landon, still reeling from the unexpected betrayal, struggled to defend himself, but the henchman overpowered him without hesitation. Pain and fear gripped him, intensifying with every passing second. He thought of Avery, the twins, and Brooke, feeling desperate for not being able to fulfill the promise he had made to them. As he was dragged out of the factory, he heard the heavy slam of the door, echoing as if the world itself were caving in. Once outside, nightfall enveloped them, casting shadows over the car, where Landon was forcefully shoved into the back seat. His mind was a whirlwind of confusion, his head pounding, but one thought echoed clearly: betrayal. He had trusted someone implicitly, and now that trust was shattered. Worse yet, he was now in the clutches of the very person responsible for his family's suffering. This can't end here. It just can't. Landon's hope flickered, barely holding on. The car started, its destination unknown but almost certainly perilous. The weight of his failure pressed down on him, but the fear for Avery, Ethan, and Mason was even more suffocating, gnawing away at him from the inside. His mind raced, frantically searching for a way out, but with his hands bound and his thoughts clouded, the bleakness of his situation loomed large. While Landon was driven deeper into the night, fighting against the harsh reality of Alex's ruthless betrayal, young Avery lay awake, restless in the cramped room where she and her brothers were hiding. Her small heart sensed something was wrong. A surge of anxiety grew within her, the unease intensifying with every passing second. Landon's words played over in her mind. "I promise, I'll be back soon." But the longer he was gone, the heavier the silence grew, filling her with dread. What if he needs me? She wondered, glancing at her sleeping brothers, both blissfully unaware of the fear gnawing at her. Determined, Avery resolved to find out what was happening. She slipped out quietly, her movements silent and swift. Ensuring the twins were secure, she left the room, blending into the shadows. Rain began to fall, thin and steady, as she crossed the dark, empty streets, her instincts guiding her in the direction Landon had taken. A cold wind bit through her jacket, but the courage swelling in her small frame was far stronger than her fear. "I have to find him," she murmured, as if praying. "He always helps me. Now it's my turn." Finally, after what felt like hours, she arrived at the deserted factory. Its looming silhouette cast eerie shadows beneath a few dim, flickering lights. Avery moved carefully along the cracked, wet walls, searching for a way in without attracting attention. The silence was thick, almost oppressive, and tension clung to the air. Peeking through a shattered window, she caught sight of Landon. He was surrounded by men she didn't recognize, but then she saw him, Alex, standing at the center with an expression as cold and unfeeling as stone. Avery's heart raced as the horrifying truth sank in. Alex had betrayed him. The scene filled her with terror, yet she refused to back down. She knew she had to act, but what could a 7-year-old girl do against such dangerous men? Then she noticed Landon's phone on the floor, lying just a few feet from Alex. Avery's heart pounded, but her resolve strengthened. She needed proof, something to save Landon and reveal Alex's treachery. Taking a deep breath, she crept forward, her tiny feet moving soundlessly in the shadows. With trembling fingers, she reached the phone and activated the recorder, catching the conversation unfolding before her. "I did what you asked, Colton. He's here, ready for you to take care of," Alex said, his voice icy, making Avery's skin crawl. "We had a deal," came a voice she didn't recognize, but instinctively knew was Colton's. "Deliver Landon, and I'll handle the rest. Don't forget, I'm always watching." Every word struck her like a blow, but she forced herself to stay hidden and quiet, tears pricking her eyes. She knew she had to keep going. As Deborah continued recording, more horrifying details emerged. Colton's twisted schemes, his chilling threats against Brooke and the twins, and the staggering betrayal that Alex had orchestrated against Landon from the very start. Every damning word was captured on the recording, and Deborah knew this was her one and only shot to protect the people she held dearest. Once the conversation finally ended, Deborah quickly ducked behind a stack of crates, clutching her phone so tightly against her chest that she could feel her heart pounding beneath it. "I have to get out of here. I have to get this to someone who can help," she thought, battling to steady her nerves and keep from giving herself away. As the men began to drag Landon outside, Deborah seized the brief moment of distraction, slipping out the very same window she had used to get in. She ran, her every step driven by the desperate urgency in her heart. "I have to save Landon. I have to save Mom," she repeated over and over, the words fueling her aching legs as she pushed onward, unwavering. Even though exhaustion clawed at her, the chill of the damp night air, mingling with the biting pulse of adrenaline, kept her going. Deborah's destination was clear. The police station, the only place she could think of that might offer the help she needed. When she finally stumbled in, drenched and breathless, her arrival startled the few officers still on duty. "Please! You have to help me! They've taken my friend! They're going to hurt Landon!" she cried, her voice raw with panic as she clutched the phone to her chest. One of the officers, a grey-haired man with a gentle expression, knelt down to meet her gaze. His eyes filled with concern. "Take a breath, sweetheart. Tell me what happened. Who are they?" In broken breaths, Deborah recounted the ordeal, her voice quivering but resolute. "They're going to hurt him. I got it all on tape," she said, handing the phone over, desperate for them to understand the danger. The officer's face grew serious as he listened, realizing the urgency of the situation. "You were incredibly brave, Deborah," he assured her as he rose to mobilize his team, his tone laced with both gravity and admiration. As the officers gathered to review the recording and prepare their response, Deborah's relief at finding help was clouded by a deep-seated dread of what could still unfold. "Please, save Landon and my mum," she begged, her voice trembling with the kind of desperation that only comes from true love. The police station buzzed with tension. Every ticking second seemed to amplify the weight on Deborah's chest, each one dragging her heart tighter with fear. The recording had given them a concrete lead, but time was slipping away fast, and the risks were deadly serious. "We have to move now. Colton won't hesitate to eliminate Landon or anyone in his way," said the sergeant in charge, his tone sharp with urgency. "We're up against dangerous criminals here. A single mistake could cost lives," he warned as the rescue plan was drawn up with swift, calculated precision. Deborah, though frightened to her core, couldn't shake her worry for Landon and her mother. Her eyes pleading, she whispered to the sergeant, "Please, don't let anything happen to him." He met her gaze with a reassuring, steady look. "We'll do everything we can to bring them back safely," he promised, before joining the officers who were assembling their gear and finalizing the plan. Deborah's heart hammered with fear, but in that moment she clung to hope with everything she had. It was the only thing keeping her grounded. As the officers moved with focus, methodically checking every part of their plan, Deborah's recording stood as their one slender advantage, their only clue to Landon's location, and the last sliver of hope they all shared. "We have to be swift and silent. Colton may have more men lurking in the shadows than we know. If he catches wind of us coming, it could mean disaster." The sergeant's words sliced through the tense silence, his voice a low, razor-sharp edge. The rescue unit left the station in careful formation, each of them hyper-aware of the looming danger. As the vehicle neared the old manor where Colton ran his operations and where Landon was being held, the air in the car thickened with adrenaline, the gravity of their mission pressing on them. "Remember, our primary mission is to get Landon out, along with any other captives we find. Colton needs to be apprehended, but lives come first." The sergeant's gaze bore into the eyes of each team member, his tone solemn yet unyielding. They nodded in quiet determination, acutely aware of the stakes. Time was running out, and every passing second could mean the difference between life and death. The vehicle came to a halt at a safe distance from the mansion, and the team slipped out, moving like phantoms through the dense undergrowth surrounding the estate. Avery had given them a meticulous account of the mansion's layout, every detail imprinted in their minds. It was critical now. Split up. 2 take the front to divert attention. The rest follow me to the back. The sergeant's orders were brisk but calm, and each man slipped into his assigned position. The tension was almost tangible, but their focus was unshakable, honed by training and the drive to complete their mission. The breach was swift and seamless. The 2 officers at the front burst through the door, unleashing controlled chaos to distract Colton's guards. Meanwhile, the others slipped in through the back, navigating the dim, winding hallways with precision. The sound of shouts and gunfire erupted, echoing off the mansion walls in a symphony of carefully orchestrated mayhem. "Search for Landon. He's likely in one of the isolated rooms," the sergeant commanded over the noise, his team sweeping every shadowed corner, weapons raised, eyes alert to every flicker of movement. Meanwhile, in a cold, cramped room in the basement, Landon's ears caught the distant sounds of the rescue. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, hope flickered within him. "They're here," he thought, his heart pounding as he strained against the ropes binding his wrists. The long hours of waiting, laced with Colton's constant threats, had sapped his energy, yet his will to survive and protect the others still blazed fiercely. Not yet. Not now. His resolve was ironclad. At last, the door to his prison splintered open, the beams of flashlights momentarily blinding him before he recognized the navy blue uniforms. "Landon, are you all right?" One of the officers rushed forward, his voice carrying relief mixed with urgency. I'm all right," Landon croaked, his voice raw but underpinned by a palpable sense of release. The officers swiftly cut through the ropes, helping him to his feet with firm grips. "Let's get you out of here," the sergeant said, steadying him, but the reprieve was brief. Just then, Colton, cornered and desperate, made his final, deadly move. "No one leaves here alive," he snarled, stepping from a side corridor with a firearm, his eyes blazing with vengeful resolve. Without hesitation, the sergeant stepped between Colton and Landon, weapon raised and unwavering. "Put the gun down, Colton. It's over," the officer commanded, his tone sharp and unyielding. Colton, however, only gave a wry smile, one that sent a chill down Landon's spine. "It's over for you, not for me," he replied coolly and squeezed the trigger. The gunshot echoed throughout the room, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. For a single, unbearable moment, Landon felt time stop, until he saw the sergeant deflect the shot just in time, the bullet striking the wall near his shoulder. In one swift movement, officers closed in, wrestling Colton to the ground before he could harm anyone else. They quickly slapped handcuffs onto his wrists, securing him firmly. The sergeant looked down at Colton, contempt evident in his gaze. "You're going to pay for this, Colton." Landon, trembling yet alive, let out a shaky breath of relief. "Thank you." "I thought that was it for me," he whispered, clutching the sergeant's shoulder for support. "You're strong, Landon. And there's someone who didn't give up on you. Someone who made sure we'd get here in time." The sergeant's words held a warmth that Landon felt down to his core, and he knew instantly who the officer was referring to. The ordeal was finally over, and Landon, though shaken, was led safely back to the police station, where Avery was waiting with anxious hope written across her face. The moment he entered, Avery's eyes filled with tears of relief, and she ran to him, wrapping her arms tightly around his neck. "I thought you weren't coming back," she whispered, her voice breaking as she sobbed into his shoulder. Landon held her close, feeling his own tears flow freely. "I promised, didn't I? You saved me, Avery. You were amazing," he murmured, his voice thick with gratitude. As the early morning sunlight crept into the room, a soft warmth replaced the days of fear that had overshadowed Landon, Avery, and the twins. The police station, which had once buzzed with tension, now exuded a profound sense of peace and relief. Colton was finally behind bars, and the justice Landon had once thought unreachable was now within his grasp. Although his body still bore the marks of their struggle, his heart felt lighter as he watched the twins play in the waiting room, their innocent laughter filling the air, a sound that seemed almost miraculous after everything they had endured. As news of Colton's arrest rippled through the community, it brought a blend of shock and relief. For years, he had held everyone under a cloud of fear, manipulating and threatening anyone who opposed him. But now, the fear he'd instilled had been shattered, his grip on the town broken at last. He can't hurt anyone ever again, Landon thought, his heart swelling with gratitude for those who had helped him, especially for Avery, whose courage and resolve had played a crucial role in unraveling Colton's empire of lies and deception. "You saved us all, little one," Landon whispered, gently ruffling Avery's hair. She looked up at him, a shy smile spreading across her face. Yet, even as they took comfort in Colton's defeat, one question lingered. What had happened to Brooke? During the rescue, police had found traces suggesting her whereabouts, and now they all waited, hearts heavy with anticipation, hoping for news that would bring the last piece of closure they needed. Time stretched endlessly, every minute thick with anticipation and silent hope. At last, one of the officers stepped into the room, his face a mix of weariness and a faint glimmer of satisfaction. "We've got good news," he announced, and the room fell silent, all eyes on him. "We found Brooke. She was being held at a secluded property, but she's alive. The medical team's with her now, and it looks like she's going to recover." His words sounded like a melody to Landon and Avery, who clung to each word. Avery, overwhelmed by relief, crumpled into a flood of tears. "Mum, she's alive," she whispered, barely believing it. Landon wrapped her tightly in his arms, his own eyes welling up. "I told you we'd find her," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. In the days that followed, they all focused on healing and rebuilding. Though Brooke was weakened and haunted by her ordeal, she was finally reunited with her children in a reunion that moved everyone who witnessed it. Avery, Ethan, and Mason embraced her, and Brooke wept, clutching them as tightly as she could. "I thought I'd lost you forever," she whispered, her voice breaking as she tenderly stroked her children's faces. "Mum, we're here now, and everything's going to be all right," Avery replied, her own tears glistening. Watching from a distance, Landon felt a weight lift from his heart. He had kept his promise, finding Brooke and protecting the children. But more than that, Landon had discovered a resilience within himself that he hadn't known existed. As he finally joined them, he said, "You're an incredible family." Brooke, visibly moved, gazed at him with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you, Landon. You saved my life. And theirs, too," she said softly, her words brimming with sincerity. "You don't have to thank me," Landon replied, smiling. "I'm just glad I could help." He knew that their journey together had transformed them all in ways they couldn't have imagined. What started as a simple act of kindness on that bleak, rainy night had become so much more. They were now a family bound not only by blood but also by love, hope, and resilience, strengthened by everything they'd been through. The future once clouded and uncertain, now shimmered with the promise of a new beginning. In the weeks that followed, life found a new rhythm. Avery, Ethan, Mason, and Brooke made Landon's home their own, turning it into a sanctuary for their newfound family. The small town, once overshadowed by Colton's presence, became a place of growth and renewal. Inspired by the courage of Landon and Avery, the townsfolk began to rebuild their lives with newfound faith that goodness could prevail, despite all odds. And so, surrounded by new friends and the peace they had longed for, Landon and his new family found what had once felt impossible, a life filled with love, hope, and the prospect of brighter days. Thank you all for following this story with me. While this is a work of fiction, there are many real children out there facing incredibly tough situations, often without a safety net or a way out. Unlike Avery, Ethan, and Mason, not every child has a Landon to step in, and sadly, the outcomes aren't always this hopeful. This story shows how the smallest acts of courage and kindness can make a huge difference, but it's also a reminder for parents and guardians. Keeping an open line of trust and communication with your kids, knowing who is around them, and always being present are some of the strongest defenses against potential dangers. Please share your thoughts in the comments, especially if this story struck a chord with you. Let's keep talking about the ways we can help children feel safe, supported, and loved. If you haven't yet, hit that like button, subscribe, and join us here as we share more stories that inspire, connect, and hopefully create a bit of positive change in the world.